Morning, ladies. Guten Morgen, I believe is the right terminology. So thank you for having us here. We are quite ingrained with Eternity because we've already done some work on it. But so Aeroband is the mother company under which we are building a community blockchain platform and ecosystem for the aviation industry. The aviation industry suffers badly from a lot of legacy. There's no solution. There wasn't a solution in sight until smart contracts came in, etc. And now the future looks a little bit brighter. While the industry has never wanted to work together, because of COVID, suddenly they have to. So we've got a kind of a bit of a boost. So I've got, because the presentation will be shared, there's a few bits of extra information and pages that I'll be skimming through. It's just so that people can read them afterwards. So don't be scared when you see so many so many slides. So we launched in 2019. Myself and Brendan comes from the revenue side of the aviation industry. That's the passenger tickets and the management of that sort of things. I come from more the costs side of the industry, paying the bills for landing in the airports and paying for maintenance and stuff like that. So together we had a vision. We were introduced by somebody, and within 2 days, that's it. We started this crazy journey, and it's been going very well. So I'll just skip through the normal stuff. We've got a team in place. It's not complete here. We also have some other news with some other advisory boards that are coming in as well. So what's the problem with the industry? So the industry is, it's absolutely crazy. Most people don't know this, but so for example, the airline industry, the airlines themselves are the ones who have to pay the most. They're at the most financial risk. For example, when you fly long haul, you fly into a city on a $250 million aircraft that the airline has had to pay for. When you get there, you get into a $30,000 taxi, which you'll pay. So on your flight ticket will be €1,000. Your taxi fare will be €40, and the taxi company will make more money off that part of your journey than the airline will have. The average profit of every single ticket in the airline industry is less than the price of a Big Mac, okay? It doesn't make sense. And that's why we're hoping to try and fix that. So the airline industry has legacy of IT systems. They actually shot themselves in the foot by being the most modern. So in the 1950s, the airline industry was one of the first industries to start computerizing things. So because they started so early, those processes that they digitized turned into billion-dollar companies, which today the airline industry is stuck with. So for one process, instead of having one simple, like the low-cost carriers today, using their websites to sell tickets, etc., it's nice and easy. They take the money on the website, they keep the money in an account. When you fly, they recognize it as revenue. In other airlines like Lufthansa, British Airways, and what have you, that will go through about 4 or 5 different systems, each costing millions of dollars a year for each one, just because they started so long ago. So some numbers pre-COVID. Obviously, COVID changed the game. You're looking at almost $1 trillion a year in the airline industry, and that's just sort of the sales, etc. And the value of it is almost $3.5 trillion. So what we're doing is we're building the ecosystem, and the idea is the Aerobloc is going to be a community project which is owned and governed by the industry. So we're just caretaking the Aerobloc. The idea of the Aerobloc is to share projects, and while we caretake it, in around 5 years or so, we will actually hand it over completely to the industry so that they run it themselves. We don't want to be king of the castle, and everybody who's tried to do something like this already, the large companies in the world, have failed purely because the airlines have always told us, we don't really understand this blockchain stuff, but what we do know is it's supposed to help us reduce our costs and also get out from under the claws of these big companies that we're stuck with. So the last thing they want to do is go into a blockchain project with these big companies as well, who are just trying to be the king of the castle and to ensnare them even more. So Aerolabs is the development company that's going to build the Aerobloc. It's blockchain agnostic as well. It's just connecting, etc. And Aerolabs itself will also be building some of the key applications that are required in the industry. But obviously the idea of the Aerobloc is that many other companies can come in and start putting together the pieces, converting the old systems into more modern smart contract technology, etc. So we have a concept called ID3, which I will show shortly. ID3 is we will bring 3 parties together. So instead of the airline industry all building 9 versions, for example, of the same software, the idea is that we will put 3 peers together, ideal being, sort of a small, medium, and large airline from 3 different parts of the world, to put the requirements together to make sure that it's a one-size-fits-all all over the industry. So these 3 will work on this one, these 3 work on this one, and then they can rent the functionality together to each other for a transactional fee. So they lower CapEx completely, and we're talking about functionality that isn't, commercially competitive with each other. So 85% of everything an airline does is exactly the same among all the airlines. So it's only on the non-competitive stuff that we're promoting, to work together, cooperate. While before COVID, it was already a little bit harder. COVID has basically made them say, no, we need to. It's just, there's no reason not to do so. So it turned into a little bit of a silver lining for us. These are some of the applications that we will do ourselves. Besides this, we're talking around, an average size airline would use around 160 different applications to operate, of which we know we can bring them down to probably about 100. Each one of these applications, they pay licenses for it, they have to pay maintenance each year, they have massive teams of people operating them and this and the other. And much of it is so simple, the process that they're doing, there's just no need for it. Basically, the industry kind of made it complicated for themselves. It wasn't complicated when they started 20 years ago, but today there is a more efficient way of doing it. So the Aerobloc is the community project. As we said, it's blockchain agnostic. It's where they can all connect together and rent the functionality of their blockchain projects to each other. What we're doing is introducing the concept of doing blockchain as a community, but doing it as an industry, right? While there are other communities out there and working together, what we have done is, especially all of the blockchains, everyone says, oh, you can do 1,000,000 things with it. You can do this, you can do that. We're like, yes, absolutely. But what we're doing is putting a bracket on this side of the airline industry and a bracket on this side of the airline industry. Everything within it is what we're focusing on. Everything outside it is everybody else's. So as I said, we're doing the ID3 concept is industry designed by 3 peers, just to make sure that the functionality works. They can share the technology together, and some of them, for putting in the effort, so these ID3 peers, for putting in the effort to put the requirements together, they end up actually being stakeholders of that application. So when other people use that application, they actually get a portion of the transaction fee paid back to them as a return on investment. So in actual fact, if they put any IT budget towards it, etc., it will be the first time in about 50 years that an IT budget for an airline has actually created a return on investment rather than just being a simple spend. This we've covered. So how to transform the industry? The problem is there's too much going on, right? So this will show sort of a little bit of an image of how every single process that there's too many middlemen applications in between, or agencies that are taking a fee, or, and when I joined the airline industry, the IT side of things, like 15 years ago, I could not believe how inefficient an industry that works so close to a clock could be. The back end of these airlines, armies of people, so they'll buy a $2 million system, to take care of their revenue. They'll pay $500,000 a year in support fees, etc. And then they need a team of 50 or 60 people to manage all the discrepancies that come out of this system. So, the administration of these systems alone, it just becomes, there's so many of these systems that they step over each other and they actually create discrepancies and problems for each other. So that's why it's time to do a paradigm shift and do a clean out and, start the process nice and easy again. So the Aerobloc is going to be an ecosystem on its own. the tech and the blockchain, it will be completely agnostic. It's the idea is that, as I said, they collaborate on non-competitive stuff. At the end of the day, paying a bill for landing in an airport is exactly the same for everybody. There is no competitive advantage. People think that, you know, some airlines, big airlines, will get a discount on price. The price doesn't actually change. The price is the same for everyone. They might give them a volume discount afterwards separately, but the actual fee that you pay, it's public knowledge. It's, you know, there's nothing secret about it. So everyone has to pay the same sort of stuff. So why does everyone have a different way of doing it when they could, you know, simplify the process? Smart contracts are the way forwards in this industry, and the reason being is smart contracts, you can take a little piece of something, of a much larger process, and take the sub-processes and do them piece by piece, so you can build it organically. Whereas in the industry today, to change something like that, you have to do a big bang approach. It's changing an entire IT system, which takes, Brenda will be able to confirm this, like sometimes 2 years, 3 years to even plan before they start implementing it, because it has such an impact on their business. But with smart contracts, they can just take little piece by little piece, take the ones that cost the most money, fix that, fix that, fix that, and just start growing and growing as they go. So for the industry, I'll show you a couple of samples as well. The idea is that, so for example, from the cost side, where I come from, there's an issue with them being able to pay their bills because there is no purchase order. Unlike other businesses where they say, okay, or if they're going to change the TVs in the seats, they'll go to Panasonic and they'll say, I need 1,000 TVs, how much per price? They'll issue a purchase order, the standard way of doing things. When it comes to however, direct operating costs are, okay, we're landing in Munich, and in Munich, the airline has to pay a passenger handling fee, for example, of €2.83 per passenger. But they don't know how many passengers are going to actually land, because even if they had 121 booked, it doesn't mean there's going to be 121 who land, because some people won't turn up, there'll be some walk-ins, it could be 123, it could be 116. And it's all those little bits, you know, you take care of the pennies and the pounds take care of themselves. So this is why smart contracts are perfect for it, because the oracle that will feed the data in will say exactly how many passengers were on that plane. There is a contract where they know exactly how much there is per passenger, and automatically the smart contract processes what the charge should be. I'll show you an example. This is a little bit more complex. So even, for example, just sharing the money that they are owed to each other, it's actually quite simple. You know, if you get on a plane, for example, in Miami, and you're going to go to Singapore, and you fly with British Airways from Miami to London, and then you fly Singapore Airlines from Miami to Singapore, there is an industry rule that they don't decide how much to share. There's a rule that says this is split upon how many kilometers the passenger has flown. So if it's $6,000 and they've flown 2,000 kilometers here and 4,000 kilometers here, then this airline is owed 2,000 and this airline is owed 4,000. You'd think it would be quite simple. In actual fact, this is one of the most complex issues in the airline industry. It's basically what that man was doing for about 15 years, the last 15 years of his life before he started doing this. Cargo is even bigger. Cargo is probably the biggest bugbear in the industry, and it's just unmanageable. So if you buy a package, it works the same way as the passenger stuff. So for example, if you buy a package in Canada, I did this, I actually tested this myself. I bought a package when I was getting married for these little gifts to give to my groomsmen, to ask them to be my groomsmen. So this package went from some little town in Canada, like Wichita, to Vancouver. From Vancouver, it flew with WestJet to New York. From New York to Miami, it flew with Delta. From Miami to Frankfurt, it flew with Lufthansa. And from Lufthansa to Malta, it flew with DHL. The total cost of the delivery was $18.20-something. So the airline that flew New York to Miami was owed 83 cents from the whole point. They don't collect it because it cost them $1.20 to actually issue the invoice, right? Now, this airline that we talk about, won't mention names, told us we think we're losing around $1 billion a year just by not being able to collect it. So as soon as you bring in blockchain and the payment is automated, everybody gets paid. None of this money gets lost, et cetera, et cetera. So we hope to do maybe a gain share agreement on some of these ones. That would be nice. And this is, for example, the landing charges that I mentioned to you. So, for example, some of the charges, this is why they get complex, but smart contracts actually make it easier. There would be a charge, for example, of the maximum takeoff weight of the aircraft is how the charge is calculated. And it would be the first 20 tons is at one price, and every ton thereafter is at another price. Don't think it's that simple, because there's actually about 100 different variations of how they would charge this. Some are fixed per aircraft type, some are maximum takeoff weight, some are maximum landing weight. There's a million different variations. And that's what makes it complex, because somebody has to work it out, get it right, this and the other. Whereas with a smart contract, once you set the rules, the flight data feeds in, and it shows this is an Airbus A320, which is this tail, which has a maximum takeoff weight of 77 tons. It landed at exactly 721. It took off again at 844. Therefore, the charge is this, right? We've actually done an MVP on Eternity for this particular system. So with this, once we put the oracles in, we're already speaking to the right people. The data is actually public. In our MVP, we can already put in various things. I mean, the oracles, we've just put some sample data in, but putting the oracles in is not an issue. Putting the charges in is not an issue. We can actually, already the structure is in place, that just putting the two oracles in place, we would be able to calculate the charges for every aircraft landing in any airport in the world without them even knowing. Oh. I hate that. No, let me go back. So, once you've just put the data in place, the idea is that it can run itself. Once the oracle feeds and plane lands, the system knows this plane has landed, therefore there are this list of charges that need to be charged. Then there are other service charges, which the local third-party providers are, so not the airport. So for example, air bridges sometimes are by the airport, sometimes are by a separate provider. You know the little truck that pushes the plane out, that pushes it back from the terminal building? That costs 600 euros a push in Frankfurt. Oh yeah, the machine only costs about 120,000 euros, and yet the license to operate it in Frankfurt is around 7 or 8 million a year per car. That's how big the industry is, that's how much money there is involved. Per car. So our MVP, this is, for example, the service register. You can see we've already put some bits and bobs together. We've tested it. It works great. There's a little bit more. Obviously, it's just an MVP to show that it does work. It needs to be enhanced and refined. But we can actually calculate all of these charges. As you can see what the rate is there. So, for example, it's $15.99 per passenger. That's a rate based on passenger. We have something called expression drivers. What is the driver of this charge? Is it passengers? Is it revenue per kilometer flown? Is it landing? Is it the maximum takeoff weight? Is it the aircraft tail? Is it the aircraft type? Is it the aircraft model? You know, it's never ending. And that's why smart contracts with oracles is the ideal situation for all of these charges to be taken care of. Likewise, on many other of the aspects of the industry, smart contracts also work as well, because most of the industry pays and wastes a lot of money. It costs a lot just because of administration, right? Just making sure that the charge is correct, making sure that they're not overpaying, they're underpaying, etc., etc. So there's some samples, like for example, it would create a charge for every single one with its own flight ID, with its own service charge, and while in the beginning it might not even be automated payment systems, then it can come in. And we have a little something that is also going to do this, which is we're launching the digital token for the airline industry, all right? So why are we launching a digital token? The airline industry is valued, as I said, as almost $1 trillion. It's the annual, its value is around $3.5 trillion, which makes its economy the size of the Netherlands, which is a top 20 global economy. Why shouldn't it have its own currency, you know? The problem with the airline industry is because they take currencies from all currencies, while one currency is working well against the other one, the airline industry, because they're taking both, is always suffering. So reducing that aspect of the financial exposure for forex currency fluctuations, etc., and also the amount of transaction fees that are involved. When you have an industry that only makes 3% profit, this is huge. So on the currency fluctuations and transactions alone, we could increase their profit margin probably by up to like, an extra 10, 15%. That's a big, big statement. And that's just with one thing, let alone the hundreds of thousands of different smart contracts that will end up being part of this. And the funny thing about it all is none of these economies would survive if the airline industry wasn't there, because they are what power the people going into trade with each other, et cetera, et cetera. So it's sort of the most important key of business and trade internationally, and yet it's the most susceptible to fail, and they're the people who earn the least money with the highest financial exposure. 5 minutes, I've only got, 20 slides to go. So IATA, which is the Aviation Association, did a test to see just, how much it works. So they wanted to see how much it would cost. So they just placed $1,000 in one airline, and they got this airline to transfer it 4 times, from one airline to another, to another, to another. The whole process took around 5 or 6 weeks, and it lost 20% of its capital value, right? So imagine you can take that out. There's only one charge to onboard the fiat into the industry token, and one charge to bring it out. Just cutting those segments along the way already makes it financially viable for them. It's very attractive. But then there are other issues that we can do as well. There's carbon credits that they can convert to, which they have to do anyway, because the industry must buy carbon credits. We're in discussions with several companies. There's many other little bits and bobs where you can actually, instead of they're taking the money here, paying for this, then they're buying this and paying transaction charges again, that bringing them into one ecosystem is how they reduce the costs, etc., of actually acquiring the stuff that they need to acquire and paying the stuff that they need to pay. So the aero economy is going to be powered by, there's the Aerobloc and Aerolabs. The stakeholders will be everyone, the airlines, the airports, etc. So the idea of the token when we launch it is that the public will be able to buy these tokens. The money of these tokens will pay for the digital transformation that the industry needs. And then, so basically they're getting guaranteed future revenue, which is actually paying for their digital transformation. And they're also guaranteeing their customers that money is always going to stay within the industry. So you could buy the tokens early on, and then you can actually use them to travel, and then the airlines can use them to pay their bills. They can settle with each other, with all the other players within the industry, and not pay these high Forex charges and bank transaction charges that they pay today. As I mentioned, the idea is that, so while the token holders would be able to stake against some of the projects, we're hoping to use one of the products that's going to come out of the Eternity House, which is for the voting on which projects to do next, etc. Superhero, I believe it's called. So there'll be Superhero Governance app. There you go. When it comes to governance, though, there's a little bit of a this is next. So the governance for the Aerobloc will never ever be a complete DAO. It's impossible, right? For example, would you really want Benjamin taking decisions upon how often an aircraft should be checked for safety? So there are certain parts. The idea is that it's going to grow organically into a DAO. Nobody knows what it's going to look like in the future. So the idea is to start small and start building and slowly push governance further out and spread it as much as possible. But there will be a certain portion of the DAO that cannot be taken by, Joe Public when it comes to safety and commercial sensitivity. When you've got an industry that, works on 3% profit, if somebody tries a hostile takeover and drops the value of it 20%, the airline industry is finished. That cannot be allowed to happen. Right? So there will always be this hybrid. How much of it will remain industry and how much of it will remain then in the traveler side of the industry remains to be seen. That's a kind of, it will grow, it will work itself out as we go along. But there is, in fact, it ends with no ifs, no buts, period. That's it. It just cannot ever be completely decided by Joe Public, who has all voting rights. So some things that will have to remain industry for regulatory issues. I'm sure you've heard of some of the horror stories, like, pilots in certain countries, they get somebody else to do their exam for them, and then they find out that after a crash, 40% of all of the pilots in this country never actually sat for their own exam. It's this sort of stuff that the industry, that blockchain will fix, and it's this sort of stuff that you and me cannot vote on. And I actually kind of know a little bit about what I'm talking about, and I still wouldn't trust me to take some votes. Oh, yeah. So for example, in Pakistan, when there was a crash not long ago, right? Was it Islamabad or Karachi? There was a crash, an airplane crash, and they did the check, and they found so many pilots never even took their own exam. The reason is it's very expensive to do that. So while they will have done their training, to make sure that they don't have to pay for it twice, they pay somebody just to sit the exam for them. While yes, I'm sure he was very good at doing his training, what have you, personally, I'd rather he did actually do the exam himself before he flies me and my children on an aircraft going into somewhere else. So the last piece of what we're doing is we've got what we're calling the metaverse. The metaverse is going to be a piece of everything. Our metaverse is the airline and travel side of the metaverse itself. So we already know that in the metaverse there's going to be stuff like you can put on VR goggles and you're going to be able to see where you're going to go on holiday in the future. And you can look around and see, oh yeah, this looks, Koh Samui in Thailand looks lovely, and what have you. Oh, who am I going to fly there with? I'm going to fly there with KLM. Click, and you can actually go and step onto an aircraft of KLM. Should I buy a business class ticket? Now the metaverse itself will actually try and promote, why don't you upgrade to business? Let me show you what it looks like. And you'll be able to visualize it. Now join in, because we're going to have all of the other side of the commercials together with, you know, the VR and the AI side of the metaverse together in one industry. They're going to be able to book directly in it and hopefully use the Aero token as well. Okay, that's me. How did I do on time? 1 minute.